Thanks to Ubisoft for letting me dive into Assassin's Creed Shadows. I did 4 hours of this during a remote preview, dived into the game, put my hands on pretty much every element of the title, from character upgrades, weapons exploration, to combat, stealth, the quests, and the main story. And subscribe for upcoming content on Shadows, Kingdom Come, Deliverance 2, Avowed, Sniper Elite Resistance, and more in the next coming 2 weeks. I cover everything I can with no sponsors, and it's because of the patrons. You can be one if you check the links. First up, when I dived into the main story, it really leaps into Japan very quickly and explains the setup of the two main characters. Much of what we know right now and what we've seen in the trailers was shown here. Offsetting protagonists that don't come on as one-trick ponies, but instead in the next 4 hours showed themselves as pretty capable in many things, but expertise that was demonstratable in their own particular areas. And was one of the first times I felt like I absolutely had to really think about how I did things in the most recent 3 Assassin's Creed games. This is something that I feel just didn't really get reflected in, let's say, Jacob and Evie in Syndicate both played somewhat similarly with small variations overall. Here it's much more noticeable that both characters work within the returning mechanics, then blended almost seamlessly with new systems designed to deliver a unique sense of exploration that truly puts you into the shoes of a ninja or a samurai, regardless of which you take on, says, go ahead and give it a try. And the first part that I tried was just moving around the game world. The map dynamically fills in and reveals all the different locations and crucial details within the overall radius of where you're exploring. Zooming in offers more information on what you're seeing around you, switching from larger locations to the more intricate details of whatever spot you're in. Ubisoft wanted exploration itself to feel like a reward more than it did originally, and I think they have delivered that for the most part. It's a unique system and not without its charm, but it was almost intangible. It wasn't something as elegant as, say, Ghost's win system, but the soft way it slowly filters information about the locations and the mixture of the new ways in which exploration can be done, and the quest's softer, specific goal settings did lend itself to a generally more discovery-filled feeling in those 4 hours I played. That's noticeable in almost every quest as well, where specific information isn't always given to you for what you need to do and where to do it. Something we've seen in the new games depending on the option you chose for the immersion level. Because some tools aren't available in this game, for instance, the actual eagles, you have other ways to do things. For exploration, you can deploy spies across the world to unlock information about missions and locations that you want to go to. It's like having a friend who's been somewhere before and whispers, you know what, when you get there, check this place out. Scouts can track down quests, they can gather resources, and they can actually help lower enemy alert areas, which I'll talk about in a second. I assume by just going in and friggin' breaking a bunch of cutlery and then running away. Regardless of how it works, it does. Also, the game has a feature called target boards. This is information about quests and characters that can be found in all the regions, and you can investigate them more. It's also connected somewhat to the agents. It's a side quest styled system that builds out as you continue to progress in the story. Now, I didn't get to experience this enough to see if it seamlessly works with the way the rest of the quests, missions, and environmental storytelling did, all of which seem to be pretty good so far. I need to see more of this board and how it works. It could be something like Dragon's Dogma quest boards and just to be kind of go here, go there things, or maybe almost like Radiant quests in Skyrim. I didn't feel like it was those, but I need to put more hands on during the review period. But one thing that is noticeable about it is there's a bit more of a hands-on feeling to that, as well as some other elements here. For example, while the iconic viewpoints are still present, they've undergone a bit of a change in how you deal with them. Instead of the constant Michael Bay 360-degree pans that automatically reveal everything, now you sort of manually scan your surroundings. It reminds me of getting binoculars in State of Decay, and those unlock locations, making the process feel a bit more intentional. At least they say that. I really felt like at the time it was different, but not something that I would hugely notice over time, other than it being something that I had to tag versus the game. It felt like a tangible difference not having the eagle there for using all the time, but not so much when you got on top of something and looked around. We'll just have to see. Also, there were areas where the characters said specific things that indicated that some characters could not, under any circumstances, get to all of those locations. There was one particular one I went by where the character I was stated very clearly they couldn't get there, but the other character could. Whether we find out that's something that changes up, I don't know. I've seen other areas that you climb up to, other vantage points, that required a little bit more work for some of the characters to go to. Also, this could be something that you unlock with later skills for both. That's something that Assassin's Creed Shadows seem to be trying to drive home all the time. It just depends on which character you are and how you integrate into the environments, what you use, and the tools, but never really leaving, for the most part, anything you can't do. And that's also including switching out the characters. It was pretty easy to switch between the two characters in the game, going into the inventory, switching them out when you want to. It's a short level load that's shorter than the first one, and it's not instant or anything close to, say, Spider-Man, but it did offer a tangible feeling of flexibility there. Also, in some missions and at some times, you can't do that switch, especially if it has something to do with a specific mission. But being able to trade them out helped, as one mission I headed into just looked to be a cavalcade of fuckery. If I went in sword swinging, it looked like it would be almost impossible. So instead, I decided to switch over to stealth and take the ninja. And talking about stealth and ninja, stealth has always been at the core of the idea for Assassin's Creed and the experience, and not always done well. At times, Assassin's Creed's felt more closer to Warrior's Creed, and I can say that this has changed a number of spots within the title that makes me feel like they understand that. Both can now go prone, though, which was awesome. Snaking behind enemies to steal stuff right behind them, or working into a doorway prone to get in and out, feels like something that should have been in every single Assassin's Creed game. Also, the game doesn't reset your animation when looting, so when you loot, you stay in the prone position versus, say, standing up and doing it. So instead of looking like some jackass popping up in the middle of the grass, you do it right there. It's a massive improvement to the feeling of stealth. Another thing that adds to this is the illumination system. We've seen this in other games, but it's highlighted here in Shadows in a way that I was not necessarily expecting. When you combine it, in particular, with going prone. Most locations in the game have all kinds of light sources you can extinguish. So if you want to, you can turn some lights off and hide out in places you wouldn't quite expect. You can sneak by, extinguish a light, then crawl through a door and around a corner, which blocks you from an enemy that would normally see you in any prior game if you were crouching. And that greatly enhances that feel of being a ninja and opens up ideas I had never thought of when it comes to stealth in Assassin's Creed, because that just simply wasn't possible. Naue still has classic Assassin's Creed eagle vision, giving her the ability to see enemies through walls and pick up relevant sounds, but she also has a grappling hook that can be used for assassinations and reaching areas Yakuza can't. And the drive home of this feeling of both of these characters that play strategically very different was something that really never stopped popping up in the game. And Shadows has distinctly changed how parkour also works. One of the biggest changes is how both characters interact with the environment. For example, Naue's approach is pretty sleek and silent, dodging, sprints, rolls over obstacles in front of her, either waist high or lower, because frankly, Yasuke leaps like a man born without friggin' kneecaps. There's also a flashy new dodge descend move and some others. To me, one of the best parts of the Assassin's Creed games, even the ones that didn't do parkour the best, is just how different they feel from most other titles when it comes to movement. One character can swing from tree branches, also has wall ejects that you can mix with other parts of the parkour moves that have been added. For example, the ability to land and soften that sound when you do so. And some of the older games like Unity have had great adjustments to how they handled parkour, and a lot of people consider that to be one of the best. This one feels oddly familiar, yet different, and absolutely better in many ways than, say, Odyssey, Origins, and Valhalla. What I like here is Yasuke can climb just like everybody else, but his movements are slower. He can't jump as high, and his approach to stealth a lot of times is basically, I'm going to smash down this door with the grace of a fucking wrecking ball. But a lot of what I enjoyed is the combat, and specifically because of the differences between them. I jumped in this and got to switch out characters many times and just see how they felt. You've got your normal assassinations, as we've seen a bunch of times, but each Assassin's Creed game has felt slightly different when it comes to the combat. For example, as the Shinobi, you have speed, agility, and precision that you can play out at any time. As the Samurai, you're a walking fortress, lumbering through fights with the weight of a small tank. Both have a general makeup, though, that is identical, which allows for some similarities here for how you at least understand the basics. Both have light attacks, which are quick and fluid. Well, on the samurai side, it's a little slower than that. But some tougher enemies can just power through them and retaliate right through that attack. Heavy attacks, on the other hand, pack a very big punch and are great for stunning an enemy or pushing one back. However, holding the attack buttons end up triggering a posture attack, which are hugely beneficial when it comes to damage output. And if you hold them for a ton of time, They do a crap ton of damage. They can be combined also with combos from normal attacks and swings as well. You can also do attack cancels, dodge cancels, blocks for the samurai, and dash dodges for the shinobi, and many more things. From the very get-go, regardless of which character I played, there was something about the way they played that felt more reactive, especially when it came to, let's say, rolls or dodge cancels or attack cancels. And if you decide not to do those, you can also block, at least as a samurai, something that the shinobi can't do. Dodging mechanics also differ between the two. For example, one has directional rolls that are a lot more flexible, especially in multi-character fights, while the other's dodge is at best a subtle reminder that 70 pounds of armor can slow pretty much anyone down. The best part so far with the combat is that each character feels different within their weight, momentum, and pure force. Where one's a scalpel, sharp and somewhat brittle, the other is a goddamn sledgehammer. And that movement, combat, just general weight come into play consistently at any time. It is a more complex game, especially when it comes to combat, with you needing to knock down enemies or knock them off balance to do damage to some of them, watch out for their attacks, break their stances, watch out for new stuns, and take into account that each of the enemies also handles different. I wish Valhalla had felt even a small amount like this, especially when it comes to weight and momentum, which would make sense because it's a Viking. By the end of the preview, I was pretty successful with it, though the game's idea of ego-driven fighting, which is the developers have said would sort of cause those in large numbers to be less defensive and then slowly become sort of more worried as they see their friends dying as you whittle away their numbers. That was actually harder to track or just discern here in my playtime. I need to get more time with that to understand how much that plays out. Now, speaking of time, the game's aggression system here has the regions that can put out bounties on your characters, and that can be depleted by switching out the character, which really removes that heat meter like you would see in, let's say, a GTA. Or you can pay off agents to go and slowly lower the heat by performing their own activities, as I talked about before. Basically, like having one group cause so much of a ruckus that nobody cares about you anymore. But you can also move time forward into different seasons, totally changing up the weather, burning off that heat meter, changing the landscapes, which can open up new opportunities for stealth, but also affects lighting and enemies' item uses in different areas. For example, if they carry different things for lighting or if different areas are lit up, and constantly delivers a feeling of a wider world and something you're experiencing. This also continues with fully customizable headquarters systems that let you build out and customize your base with things like entertainment areas and dojos, places for agents, and a ton more. What I saw had a couple dynamic weather systems, a city location or two, tons of wilderness locations, and an eye towards atmosphere that was really spot on. Dragging my ass through a bunch of rice paddies made me actually fear a little bit for this character sinking up to his nuts in seconds, but then pounding down an embankment to a beach to take out a bunch of bandits or walking through a small port town consistently reminded me of just how scary it'd be if the only people in the region were the militant soldiers who had weapons and everybody else had like a raw fish they could flop into somebody's head. Graphically, the game looked great. There were a couple small bits here or there of graphics problems, little glitches. I don't know the hardware this was running on at the time, but some of the amazing locations and insane draw distance seems like Ubisoft has aimed at delivering a location that's larger than Origins, but smaller than Valhalla and more organically discovered than both. What remains to be seen is how the voice acting and story work out. I gotta admit, some of the voice acting was a bit rough on the female lead side with lines that seemed odd in English, but it's got full Japanese lines for everybody who wants to check that out, which I'm going to do for the review. I love the design of the characters and the look, but the story was also disjointed due to how they paced this hands-on test, which is something I've heard others discuss who got the hands-on. It's just the way many of these games are previewed. I like the story in general, but a massive leap in time and the skill of the characters from the start to the next mission meant that the why of things, the core crux of the characters' drives to be who they are and what they do, wasn't really explained. Overall, I was pleasantly surprised with Shadows so far. It felt better than Valhalla by a good amount, especially when it comes to where Valhalla was for the preview and this game, especially when it comes to combat for either character, and the more robust combat system, if it continues to pan out as you play through it, means that a pure combat scale here would put this better than a lot of the other Assassin's Creed games. It was the adjustments to parkour that I also noticed, and stealth in particular. During my time, it just really felt like it was working. Going prone changes that dynamic incredibly, as does the real-time changes to the lighting that you can do, or the weather and the seasons. However, I still do believe that a lot of the crux of an Assassin's Creed game, while it is gameplay, is also the story and the presentation, and that was something that was definitely hard to clamp onto while I was doing this preview, and it's something that will be important to me. Will the curve of experience continue? Will it still be something that doesn't get boring after a particular amount of hours? What I saw, some of the side things that I don't necessarily want to discuss, like activities, looked pretty cool. We'll just have to see how many times they are. Some of the characters that you were introduced to were actually quite enticing, but you didn't really get to talk to them very much because, again, remote preview. This is just the way these things end up occurring. It's crazy to me because I really do think that the Assassin's Creed 3 titles that we've seen, they've tried and there have been some great successes, but overall, only one of the games has wowed me, Odyssey. It feels like they are taking some risks, keeping some things identical and improving other elements that just haven't come together in the new 3-game trilogy. And while I need more time to see if those changes pay off, I can confidently say I was surprised how much better, or at least varied, the fighting was, the stealth was, and the parkour was. Will it end up achieving the same heights of, let's say, Unity's parkour? We'll just have to see. They've done some work on making sure that both characters feel unique and the world does as well. But just like Valhalla, sometimes what feels good a couple hours in feels terrible later. Those are my thoughts on the preview. I would love for you to subscribe or become a YouTube member or join up with the Patreon, which helps the channel. We don't do sponsors. We don't go to the events. We do these things either remotely or I don't do them at all, because I just don't believe in that kind of stuff. If you want to help out the channel, I would love for you to jump in. If not, I would love for you to jump out and, hey, maybe into another one of my videos. Peace out and enjoy the rest of your week.